Welcome to Coffee with the Pastor. This week we are looking at Ephesians chapter 6, which is the armor of God. And you'll remember that Paul told us that we're in a war. We're having battles with Satan and his principalities, his powers, his authorities. But he's not left us powerless to fight this war. We can fight this war in God's power, and he's given us a suit of armor to be able to battle with it. Paul uses the imagery of how a Roman soldier was dressed for battle, and that they were issued a uniform which would protect them in battle. And he's used that as a way of just saying how that we can stand and do battle with Satan. Yesterday we talked about the buckle and the breastplate, and then we take it up with verse 15, and he said, and with your feet fitted with readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. The Roman soldier uniform had special shoes, and it was kind of the difference between it kind of was a combination of a boot sandal. It had support for the ankles and things, but it was open-toed, I guess, so that they wouldn't rub blisters or anything on it. They also had spikes in the bottom of their shoe, so that when they were in battle, they could stand their ground. The Roman soldiers' fighting method was to fight together. And so if one soldier would fall, it would make them all vulnerable. So they had shoes that would help them dig into the ground and would stay. And we know this because, when I played baseball, I had a certain type of cleat. When I played football, there was a different type of cleat. And then when I played golf, they had different golf shoes with spikes on them. So this is nothing new to us. We know about them, but they had them way back with the Roman soldiers. But he compares this to having the gospel of peace. Now, one of the things that we have to understand is Satan is a liar. We've talked about that. And so that we had to deal with the belt of truth with him on that. Our moral character helps that, but there's something that Satan does in our lives that he attacks us on, and that's he wants us to be divided. He wants us to have lots of conflict, and we see that today. We see it in our politics. I mean, there's a huge conflict. There's in our country. We look at all the division, all the conflict. Well, that's a sign of Satan, truthfully. We see it in our families. We see conflict in our families. We see confusion. We see chaos in there. We even see it in our churches. A lot of times there's just conflict that shouldn't be there, and you think, where did this come from? And then you realize, okay, this is our battle. This is who we're battling. Because it's Satan who wants to keep us without peace. But he said, God has given us the gospel of peace, the good news of peace. The Greek word for peace here is irene, which would be the equivalent of shalom in Hebrew. But shalom in Hebrew means that peace is what we have when we're right with God and we're right with other people. That's when you have peace. And the only way to have peace is to be right with God and then to be right with other people. If you have conflict with God, you're not going to have peace. If you have conflict with other people in your life, you're not going to have peace. And Paul says peace is something given by God. And it's something we're to strive for. To be right with God, be right with others, we have peace. So that's our shoes, and so we'll move on to the next one. And we're going to have a shield. He said, and this is verse 16, it says, in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. So take up the shield. Now, the Roman shield, when I think of a shield or a see reenactments, and a lot of times they look like trash can lids that you can kind of hold and all. But that's not what they were. They were large shields. They were like 2 by 4, and they could literally go into a battle. They could go in to take the aggressive, and people could throw their arrows at them. They could shoot their javelins at them. The word here is dart or arrow. A lot of people feel like it's kind of more like of a javelin, but they tried to do it more to just set it on fire. And I think that was more for terror. I mean, let's just face it, if you see flaming arrows coming at you, if you see flaming javelins come at you, that could be kind of terrifying. But they have the shields up, and those shields were so strong that those did not get through. And Paul says this is like faith. He says Satan's going to throw things at you. He's going to throw things at you all the time. And we talked about how he lies to you. He tries to cause confusion. He's doing all kinds of things to discourage you. He's trying to get all things to distract you. That's what flaming arrows do. They distract you from what you're supposed to be doing. If you got your mind thinking about those flaming arrows rather than pushing ahead, you won't get where you need to be. You need to have faith. And faith is one of God's gifts to us, that we can live this life by trusting Him and pushing forward. I like what Tony Evans defined faith as. He once said, faith is acting like it is so, even when it is not so that it might be so, simply because God said so. I think that's good enough. I want to say it again. This is from Tony Evans, by the way. Faith is acting like it is so, even when it is not so that it might be so, simply because God said so. And we live by faith. And Satan wants us to live by fear. He wants us to live by confusion. He wants to live in conflict. But we're to live by faith. Faith in something more. And remember last week we talked from Colossians 3 that we're to have our minds on things above. Not all the distractions of this world and all the things that's happening with this. Take up your shield of faith. So today I hope you'll put on your armor of God. We've so far this week looked about putting on the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness. Today we looked upon how having the shoes fitted with the gospel of peace. And we've got the shield of faith that will knock down any of Satan's arrows today. Hope you have a great day. And we'll talk more about Ephesians 6 and the armor of God tomorrow. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.